Okay guys, so today I'm continuing my series on what makes a deck good, this time for Maliss in Alliance Insight format. I want to show you with 3 different games, 3 different replays, why this deck is so good, why they're so consistently able to achieve their game plan, and what makes them different from other decks that are also pretty good. I mean, White Forest, by any traditional standard, is an excellent deck that can make excellent boards and has some resilience to playing through some interactions, but is nowhere near as consistent at playing through very powerful interactions when compared to Maliss. So I'll show you 3 different games here, playing through different hand traps and also playing into a board that illustrate that and hopefully give you a better idea of how the deck works and why this deck is good. But I don't want to go in depth on the deck profile itself because I don't think I'm good enough yet to give my own take on, for example, is Bomber Dragon actually better than Allied Code Talker? I'm not sure. I'm not convinced by the efficiency of this card in terms of the resources it costs you to actually, loop this twice out of turn, which is usually what's required to beat the mirror. And I also don't know what I think about people who are only playing MTP07 versus also GWC, or some people like Lukasako who are playing TB11 still in addition to all of those things. So more on that will come later, but let's get into the first of 3 replays. So the first 2 are going to be playing through hand traps, and the third one will be a full game. Okay, so this one is playing into some low impact hand traps. This is post side, that's why I have a Solemn Strike here. And here you see I have a pretty decent hand. So there is a starter, there's a post side card, there's some insulation against interaction, and there's a high quality extender. So this is really like a pretty great hand, but also it's not an unusual hand. This is a pretty normal hand, I guess. I mean, maybe it wouldn't be Dormouse, but it doesn't really matter what the card is as long as it says Maliss on the card text. So here I begin by summoning Dormouse and I activate the effect and the opponent chains Imperm. So before Alliance Insight, what happened here is if you don't have a good extender like a Bestial, so this is post, Link Decoder ban and all that type of stuff, if you didn't have a Bestial or some other good extender in hand, you might actually pass turn. And so your opponent, by imperming the Dormouse, was taking a gamble that they may just win off the single imperm. Of course, you could play a critical mass of Bestial, so that was extremely unlikely to happen, but now post Alliance Insight, the number of starters we have and the quality of starters is so high that this card, you can basically do all of your combos and just assume that you get impermed on the first thing, and it won't really change the end board anyhow. So here I go into a Lingaribo, and now that I have a Cyberse monster special summon from the extra deck, I can special summon my backup from hand. And the backup is going to be able to search here, but the opponent will chain an Ash Blossom. Now you can debate whether or not you should Ash this. The fact is that in Maliss, there are very few spots that Ash actually matters. Maybe you could argue that you can save the Ash for the white binder to bring back from Banished, but it's not a guarantee that that will happen. You could argue that if someone is only playing MTP07 as a combo piece, you can save the Ash for that MTP07 because it does add to hand. But you don't know if your opponent is only playing that, and as opposed to just setting some other trap card like GWC, or if they're even going to go for MTP07 in the beginning versus just getting it out of turn. So, ashing this is kind of like, okay, well, this is a super good card, so I'm just going to ash this because I don't know if I'll be able to ash the white binder later, or if it'll even matter at that point. So the opponent has thrown 2 hand traps here, 2 generic hand traps, and if you think of, typical ratios in a deck that plays 15 or maybe even 18 hand traps, reasonably you would expect to have your non-engine looking like this on your turn 0. But it doesn't matter because for some reason, and this is pretty unusual in Yu-Gi-Oh history, or at least until recently, the Maliss boss monsters only require a single name to be a Maliss name. That is why a Nib token actually really is a combo piece, because as long as I can get access to any Maliss name, I can get any Maliss boss monster and continue comboing as if nothing happened. So Imperm and Ash together, which if people remember back in the Snake Eye days, these are the types of low impact but critical mass hand traps that you'd be throwing at each other and playing hand trap wars. But for Maliss, it usually just doesn't matter because the bodies replace themselves, and as long as you have a single name, you can go into the final boss monster and continue your combo. So the opponent scoops there after realizing that his hand traps don't matter. Before I get into the actual game, I also want to show you that Maliss often has lots of hands that are good not just into generic hand traps, but into hand traps that are specifically designed to be good against Maliss. So I'm not going to be showing the Lancia stuff now because I think everyone's already seen that, where you have backup and you go for, whatever your play is and maybe pass on a Cryptor or whatever. But here I start with a Chessy Cat, which, people tend to not play at 3 because they think it's the worst one. But point of fact is, this says Maliss in the name, and therefore this card is exceptional. So I start with a Chessy Cat and I activate the effect to banish to draw 2. You can debate whether or not the opponent should have chained both meowls here. But let's leave that aside for the moment and just think here. If we look in my hand, again, this is post side. I have a strike, so this is a post side card. I have a high quality extender in Maliss and Underground, and I have another normal summon. And then another high quality extender in backup at Ignister. But the Maliss and Underground doesn't really count now. This has been basically turned off by the meowls because I don't want to give him 2 draws just to give me 1 body. That's not super efficient. The White Rabbit I could have normal summoned first, but I rather play the resource game when I know that regardless of how my opponent responds, like whether they imperm this or the White Rabbit, it doesn't matter because those just go into Lingeribo, and then I summon the backup at Ignister and I do whatever I want anyhow. But the opponent doesn't like that I have a Pot of Greed built into my engine, so he's choosing to double meows here, because typically you might banish a card and summon that back. So here I am going to banish the White Rabbit, and I am not going to summon it back. I'm actually planning, I believe here I'm planning on ending on a Heart Scriptor without giving him a single draw. So here I banish the White Rabbit, I draw 2, which is totally fine. I draw pretty good cards. And now I can go into a Lingeribo. I'll set my MTP07, and here I can special summon my backup because I control a Cyber Monster summoned from the extra deck. That can activate the effect, and here I'll search for my March here. I will pitch the Underground, which is no longer useful to me because of his double meows. And I can back up to banish the Maliss and Underground to summon itself. I now have 3 monsters on field, which can go into a Heart Scriptor. So now I have 2 Maliss names banished, which is usually the number you want for Heart Scriptor. I have my post side card here in Strike. I have my MTP07, which could have been searched off of a normal summon on Rabbit. And I have my Maliss in the Mirror because, you know, I got a Pot of Greed, because why do I not have a Pot of Greed in the most broken deck in Yu-Gi-Oh? And now I can pass turn. The opponent has 3 cards in hand after basically hand looping himself for 2. So he draws a card, he draws a 4th card, he summons back up at Ignister, showing that he doesn't actually have a good way to play because you would normally never lead with this card. And because he's revealing that he has a bad way to play, I can just strike that. So he has no normal, he can't continue putting other bodies on field, and he loses the game. Okay, now I will show you the final game. This is an actual game, and I've drawn a very awkward hand, and here this is against, I believe, White Forest Fiendsmith. This is a 45 card build, which is actually not super unusual for a Fiendsmith because you can't really stick to 40 in Fiend. Well, you can, but you know, a lot of people don't. So the opponent begins by going main phase 1, activating Hallowed Azamina. And if we take a look at my hand here for a second, I am heavily incentivized to resolve H-Harmony because I have no way to actually play. I have Droll, which is great against White Forest, and you're heavily incentivized to not wait for the Droll, but to Droll as early as possible. I have Imperm, which is sometimes great, sometimes useless against White Forest. And then I have 2 cards that are, in this case, basically bricks. So he activates Hallowed, I chain Foolos. He does not have Called By or an Ash, or he just doesn't want to use it, and so he goes into Murcielago. So here I draw into a Talents, which is still not actually what I'm looking for. The Murcielago here will search for a Wanted, and this is my first branch here, my first real choice that I can make. So I can Droll here. He will chain Wanted, obviously, so that he gets to search before the Droll resolves, get access to Black Witch, and because he's on Fiendsmith, he'll get whatever the Witch sets, which could be a Morian, it could be as simple as the White Forest. Those are the typical ones that almost everyone is playing. So it will be a real thing. Whatever he sets off of the Witch is most likely not fake. It's probably a real interaction. And then those 2 bodies can go into, at the very least, a Closed Heaven, and he can make his Wave Hiking Caesar or his Desiree based on whatever build he's going for. I believe that I make the wrong decision here, and I Droll. And the reason that I do this, knowing that he can Wanted, is I'm thinking my hand is so bad that I have to high roll him. This Droll has to basically end his turn. When I say end his turn, I mean he goes Witch, he sets that, he goes for a Fiendsmith monster, and he passes turn, and I draw a great card. If I allow him to continue playing, I actually don't know what he would do, but I think in hindsight, the better play was to, knowing that he's on Fiendsmith, actually see if he's going to play into the Foolos first, and wait until he reveals a White Forest card before I decide whether or not I'm going to Droll. So I think I made the wrong play here. So here he sets the Morian, he adds back the Hallowed, he goes for the Closed Heaven, and he makes the correct play here. So he's not playing into an Ash. If he had just gone into a Requiem and then Requiem to bring out Lacrima, he would have played super hard into an Ash. But here he goes the correct sequence, and he goes for Hallowed, sending the Morian to bring back out the Ilia Sylvia. And now because he controls a level 5 or higher Illusion or Spellcaster monster, he can bring out the Morian from the grave, and it will be banished when it leaves the field. So it's a very, very efficient use of resources here. So now he goes Requiem into Lacrima, and Lacrima will dump an Engraver. And now he goes into Necroquip, and then into the Engraver, and he goes into the Wave Hiking Caesar. So if we take stock of what's on the field right now, this is a non-trivial board to crack because he has the Morian set, which is actually pretty good against Maliss because this stops the link ladder. He has Ilya Sylvia for whatever he wants. He has Wave Hiking Caesar, which is very good against Maliss. And then he also presumably has a Paradise set up for dumping Desiree out of turn. Not to mention, on the crackback, he will have access to Hallowed Add Back, and I don't know what the cards in his hand are. So, I've drawn a Dormouse, so that means I basically have one line of play, and I have to choose if I'm going to begin with Imperm on Ilya Sylvia or Imperm on Wave Hiking Caesar. I think that in hindsight, maybe I Imperm the wrong card. So normally you would Imperm the Wave Hiking Caesar. I don't know if he would negate that or not. I guess if he negated it, that would be better for me because I could talents take the Wave Hiking Caesar, summon the Dormouse, see if it resolves, and then if it doesn't, I could just make Haggard and bring back the Dormouse. And I would have a limited number of interactions I could play through in that case. But I choose to Imperm the Ilya Sylvia because my thinking here was he's going to make my talents live as soon as I summon Dormouse. I'm thinking probably that's what's going to happen, right? Because normally when you summon Dormouse and they have the Lacrima and the Requiem Engrave set up, usually they will cycle this to dump the Paradise so that they can Paradise and get rid of, like your Splash Mage when you get to it and whatever. And they're not like scrambling to do it and they like miss the appropriate window for it. So I'm thinking that he's going to play into the talents immediately and I can talents to take the Wave Hiking. But actually my thinking didn't make a lot of sense here because I was thinking if I could take the Wave Hiking, I might be able to stop some of this from happening because these are special summon effects. But of course, he's going to do this before I can even take the Wave Hiking, so it doesn't really matter. So here he goes for the Lacrima, and he does indeed dump the Paradise. I bring out the White Rabbit. I'm checking to see if he's going to Paradise here, but he does not Paradise here. Normally, you would not want to Paradise there. You want to save the Paradise for the Link 2. To cut me off of like having a Cyberse monster summoned from the extra deck, so I can't use my backup or my wizard, and to make it a lot harder for me to get into a Link 3. So instead, what he's going to do here is he's going to Morian the White Rabbit because that forces me to have an extender. If I don't have an extender, the Dormouse is just going to be sitting face up, and this will be sitting face down, and I can't continue playing. So I decide to chain Maliss in the Mirror here and target the Wave Hiking Caesar. And I'm not going to get back the White Rabbit because this was already banished off of Dormouse. But I'm now thinking, well, I'm going to lose this. So this is a useless body anyhow, so I might as well get rid of that to negate the Wave Hiking Caesar. And if I can set GWC here, potentially I can GWC to bring back the Rabbit by banishing the Dormouse's cost. Dormouse will come back, and then I can continue laddering from there. The problem is this doesn't deal with the Paradise. So what I was optimizing for here was being in a game state where I could talents take a monster, but really what it turned out was the limiting factor in this game was the Paradise, which I can't interact with my talents. So I think I prioritized the wrong things here, and this is actually making things more difficult for me than they could have been. So now I talents to draw 2 because I figure if I talents to take anything, like a Wave Hiking Caesar, I turn this and this into Haggard, he's just going to Paradise and dump the Desiree and send the Haggard before I can bring back Dormouse. And so that line just immediately loses to the known interaction. I should also mention that at this point, I'm thinking that he may not even have any hand traps in his hand, but he got drolled early. And so these could just be White Forest cards for all I know. And so it really is just the Paradise that I'm trying to play around. So I'm like, okay, if the talents to take loses, going into Haggard loses to a single Paradise, I actually have to draw 2. I don't have an option and see what I get here. So now I go into Lingaribo. The reason I do that is because I don't have a Maliss monster in grave. And so neither the Magnamut nor the March here are actual true extenders for me right now. So here I go Magnamut to target my Dormouse, and he does actually have a Bell in hand. This is not a bad card, this format, actually. I'm surprised that more people aren't playing it, but because so few people are playing it, I never play around it, actually. So it reveals the Bell here, and so my Magnamut will fizzle, but luckily I've also drawn into a March here, so now I can activate the here, I can banish the Dormouse and bring the Dormouse back. And so let's again take stock of our situation. We have a GWC, we have an MTP07. The Dormouse and the Rabbit have used their banish effects. The March here has not, but this is not super relevant for link climbing because if we use the banish effect and add it back, we've already used the effect to summon from hand, so that would be more of like a follow-up type play. Right now, we know that he has Paradise live. So there are a couple options here. I could Splash Mage with the Dormouse and the March here, and if he Paradises on the Splash Mage, I can Lingaribo to get rid of the Splash Mage. Or sorry, I can Lingaribo to get rid of the Paradise effect and save the Splash Mage. The Splash Mage will bring back, one of these two bodies, and then that can go into the Binder or the Red Ransom or whatever, because we haven't used our Chessy Cat yet. So we have lots of different ways of continuing the play here. I even could not go into Splash Mage, and I could just make a Link 3 immediately. Like, I could go into a White Binder, and I could force the Paradise immediately, because if he Paradises to dump Desiree to try to send the White Binder, I already have the GWC where I could banish the Binder, bring back, for example, a Rabbit or whatever else I want to bring back. The Binder will come back on a new chain, and I'll even get a draw off of that. So there are lots of different ways that I could attempt to play this out. And I decided to still show this game despite the fact that I actually misclick the wrong monster. And so I'm trying to summon a White Binder with all of my monsters, and I summon a Splash Mage using the Lingaribo, which, like, not only is this an inefficient play, but it's the only possible way to lose in this situation to the Paradise. So I open my extra deck, and I'm going to click the White Binder, and they're both blue. Dude, like, literally, they're both blue and white. And so I go to click on the White Binder. I'm not saying the White Binder play was better than the Splash Mage play, by the way, but I'm going to make the White Binder because I'm thinking it doesn't matter. There's no way he can beat the White Binder, right? He's already shown the bell. There's no way he can stop the White Binder. He has no play around it, okay? And I misclick, and I click on the Splash Mage instead of the White Binder. So now he can he's like, this guy can't believe his luck. He banishes the Paradise, he dumps the Desiree, he sends the Splash Mage, and I have literally no play. I have no play. If I GWC to banish the Dormouse, it won't come back. So whatever I bring back will just be one monster. If I MTP to banish to get something, this won't come back. I've already used the March here. I've already used my normal. The Magnamon is fizzled. There's no way for me to continue playing. So what should have been, actually, I don't want to say that it was straightforward, but pretty smooth sailing into cracking a pretty strong board here. I misclick, and I make not only a Splash Mage, but I make it with a Lingaribo, and I lose to my only lose condition, which was super easy to play around. But anyhow, the point of me showing this is just to show you that actually, despite the opponent having a bunch of like really strong monsters and me having initially a pretty poor hand and drawing into good extenders, there is still usually a way to win when you're playing Maliss. And so that is one of the reasons that Maliss is such a good deck, and that's one of the reasons why Maliss is so hard to beat and can play through almost anything. So this is the deck that I was playing. If you have any feedback, please let me know. If you want to join the Discord and at me, I'm usually active there, so feel free to do so. And thanks for watching.